The canyon was silent, save for the crunch of boots against brittle stone and the low murmur of wind threading through jagged cliffs. The sun beat down mercilessly, casting long harsh shadows against the red rock walls. 3 figures moved along the narrow trail, dust-streaked, sweat-slicked, and not speaking much. They had been hiking for hours, lured into this forgotten stretch of wilderness by a half-baked plan for solitude and some kind of reset. Dylan, the youngest, carried a camera slung over his shoulder and walked a little ahead, his enthusiasm undeterred by the heat. Behind him trudged Mark, a former vet with tired eyes that missed nothing. Bringing up the rear was Cole, older, quieter, the kind of man who had long ago stopped explaining his silences. They hadn't expected to find anything in this canyon. That was the point. No cell service, no people, just red stone and sky. But then came the sound. At first it was barely noticeable. A distant, strangled whinny, warped by distance and heat. Dylan stopped short, lifting a hand. "Did you guys hear that?" Mark glanced up from the trail, brows furrowed. "Could have been the wind." "No," Dylan said, his voice hushed but certain. "It wasn't." Cole halted, eyes scanning the ridge line. "Animal in trouble?" he muttered. They stood there for a moment, ears tuned to the air. Then it came again, a broken, desperate cry, not quite a scream but close. Something alive was suffering. Dylan turned, already stepping off the trail toward the sound. Mark hesitated for only a second before following. Cole sighed, spat in the dirt, and went after them. They picked their way down a steep slope, gravel skittering underfoot. The cry came again, clearer now. Whatever it was close. The scent hit them first, earthy, coppery, wrong. Dylan's hand flew to his nose. Ugh. Something's dying. As they rounded a narrow outcropping, the source of the sound came into view. A wild Mustang, bay-colored and caked in dust, lay collapsed on its side in the dry brush. His chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular movements. His legs were folded beneath him, trembling with effort or fear, it was hard to tell. Flies buzzed around his flanks. His mane hung in matted ropes and his eyes, half-lidded and glassy, rolled weakly toward them. None of the men spoke for a moment. Then Mark stepped forward slowly, his voice low and soothing. "Easy, boy. Easy." The horse didn't try to rise or flee. He just watched them, breathing hard, nostrils flaring. Dylan began filming instinctively, then hesitated, lowering the camera. "What happened to him?" "Exhaustion," Mark said. "Dehydration, maybe injury. Could be old. Could be shot. But something kept him here." Cole moved in a slow arc, studying the scene. "Why's he laying like that?" "He's guarding something." They saw it then, how the Mustang's front legs were tucked oddly as if bracing against something beneath him. There was a glint of movement under his chest. A flutter, small and subtle. Dylan crouched low, peering beneath the stallion's frame. He froze. "Oh my God," he whispered. "There's something under him." Mark joined him, lowering to his knees. From beneath the horse's heaving body, a tiny, fragile form came into view, a newborn foal, barely larger than a medium-sized dog. It was curled tight, legs limp, coat still slick in places from afterbirth. Dust clung to it like a second skin. Its eyes were shut, and it barely moved except for a weak shudder of breath. The Mustang had collapsed over the foal, shielding it from the sun. Mark's voice cracked. "That's his baby." Cole blinked slowly, the realization sinking in like lead. "Where's the mare?" "Gone," Mark said almost to himself. "Maybe died giving birth. Maybe poachers got her. This stallion? He's been protecting the foal on his own." They all stood in stunned silence. Dylan took a shaky step back. "How long has he been like this?" "Long enough to nearly die doing it," Mark replied. "This shouldn't be possible. Stallions don't do this. They fight, they lead. But they don't," he broke off, overwhelmed. Cole knelt beside the stallion and touched its neck gently. The skin was hot, tacky. The Mustang shuddered but didn't resist. "He's done everything he could. And now he's breaking." Mark sat back on his heels, thinking fast. "We have to help them. Both of them. We need to get water into him. Shade. Something." "There's nothing out here," Dylan said. "Just rock and dust. The jeep's 2 hours back." "We can't move the foal far without hurting it," Mark said, eyes locked on the tiny chest rising so faintly. "And the stallion can't walk. Not like this." Cole rose, his expression hardening into something resolute. "Then we don't leave them." They improvised a makeshift camp around the pair, using jackets and gear to create shade. Dylan fetched water from their packs, pouring a little into a cup and tipping it gently toward the stallion's mouth. The horse flinched, then drank, slowly, cautiously. The foal didn't stir. Mark checked for injuries. No broken bones. Just weak. Too weak. Needs milk. They had none. Only energy bars, electrolyte packets, and determination. The sun dipped lower as the canyon shifted into shadow. The silence returned, heavy now, not peaceful but pressing. Dylan watched the foal, his voice barely above a whisper. He's so small. He's got the heart of something bigger, Cole said. You don't survive out here without it. Time moved strangely after that. They took turns keeping watch, cooling the stallion, trickling water into him, shielding the foal. It was Mark who noticed first hours later that the stallion had shifted, just slightly. Enough to free one leg. A good sign. He wants us to help, Mark said. He's trusting us. Cole glanced at the foal, whose sides now moved a little steadier. We've got to get them out. Tomorrow morning. It's too dark to move now. Dylan sat close by, arms resting on his knees. He stared at the pair, father and child, and something shifted in him. He'd come here to film wild beauty. But this wasn't beauty. This was raw, brutal, miraculous survival. It was better. The stars began to appear one by one. The canyon fell into deep quiet. The Mustang slept, still breathing. The foal twitched now and then as if dreaming. Dylan looked at Mark. What happens if we can't get them out? We will, Mark said. Cole didn't answer. He just looked toward the black silhouette of the cliffs and listened, for the wind, for danger, for hope. In the shadows, the Mustang's ears flicked. His breath deepened, steadier now. Even as his body rested, his instinct remained. He was still protecting, still fighting, still refusing to surrender. And beneath him, the tiny foal shivered once, then nestled closer, alive. The night stretched long and full of questions. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a reckoning. The canyon didn't sleep, not truly. As the moon climbed high and cast silver over the jagged walls, the wind shifted with a keening edge. Coyotes cried in the distance. Somewhere, rocks dislodged and tumbled, too far to see but close enough to remember how wild this land still was. Dylan barely slept. He lay with his back against a warm boulder, blanket drawn tight, eyes flicking constantly to the Mustang and the foal. The animal hadn't moved much, though his breathing had steadied. Occasionally his ears twitched or his nostrils flared as if sensing threats they could not. The foal had nestled deeper beneath him, still too weak to stand but alive. That fact alone pulsed like a fragile miracle. In the cold hush before dawn, Mark stirred. He moved slowly, groaning slightly as stiff joints protested. Without a word, he checked the stallion's pulse, then gently touched the foal's muzzle. It was cool but not cold. He smiled faintly, more in relief than hope. They've made it through the night, he said softly. Cole sat nearby, a shadow carved in silence. He hadn't slept either. His eyes, sharp and distant, had been on the ridge for hours. Watching. Guarding. The man was stone until the moment he moved, and when he did, it was only to step closer to the Mustang's side and kneel. What do you see? Mark asked. Cole didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached under the stallion again, slower this time, feeling for something near the foal's side. His brows tightened. He shifted the light from his flashlight ever so slightly and looked closer. Then he froze. There's something wrapped around the foal, he muttered. Dylan crept closer. What do you mean? Wire. Cole's voice sharpened. Barbed wire. Around its back legs. Tight. Nearly embedded. Mark knelt beside him, the color draining from his face. That's why the foal can't move. And why the stallion didn't leave, Cole added grimly. He couldn't. Not with the baby trapped. Dylan inhaled sharply, a mix of fury and awe. He laid on top of it, so nothing else would get close. Mark nodded slowly. He became a shield. They worked quickly, using a multi-tool from Mark's bag to snip the rusted wire. Every movement was careful, measured, not to startle the stallion or cut the delicate skin beneath. When the wire was finally removed, they could see the damage, thin, bloody gouges on the foal's legs. Nothing fatal, but enough to maim if left untreated. Cole wrapped a clean bandage around each leg with the precision of someone who'd done this before. On soldiers, on animals, on friends in places where hospitals didn't exist. He said nothing, but his hands trembled ever so slightly when he tied the last knot. Who does this? Dylan asked in a low voice. Who strings barbed wire out here? Mark exhaled slowly. Illegal trappers maybe? Or ranchers trying to block off wild routes. Either way, it's not supposed to be here. The sun finally rose, casting long fingers of gold across the canyon. With the light came clarity, The stallion's coat gleamed faintly, even under the dust, and the foal blinked against the brightness, its eyes beginning to open for the first time in hours. They prepared to move. Mark fashioned a sling from old hiking ropes and jackets, a cradle to carry the foal gently. Dylan fetched water and coaxed the stallion to drink again. Cole scouted the path upward, checking for loose rock and sign of predators. Every movement had purpose now. They didn't speak much, not because there was nothing to say, but because the moment was too sacred for casual words. It took them over an hour to get moving. Dylan carried the foal, cradling it against his chest, feeling every tremble of its breath. The stallion, though still weak, rose with a groan and stumbled forward, guided gently by Mark and a makeshift halter. The animal leaned into the human presence without resistance. It was not trust exactly, but something close, an understanding built on suffering. They moved slowly, winding back through the canyon, navigating the sharp slopes and loose ground. Twice the stallion stumbled, once nearly collapsing, but Cole was there each time, catching him with hands steady as stone. Dylan lagged behind once, needing to stop and shift the foal's weight, and when he did, the Mustang turned, nostrils flaring, eyes wild with sudden panic. "He won't leave it behind," Mark said. "Even now. Not for anything." They reached the ridge by midday. The sun was fierce again, the canyon behind them endless and shimmering. The jeep sat just beyond the trees, dusty and waiting. It felt like an anchor to the world they'd left behind, a place where wild things didn't suffer alone and men didn't stumble on tragedy wrapped in barbed wire. They loaded the foal into the back carefully, layering towels and jackets to cushion every bump. The stallion hesitated when the door opened. His legs shook and for a moment they thought he would collapse again. Then he saw the foal. And he stepped in. The ride was quiet. No one talked much. Dylan sat in the back beside the foal, one hand resting on its side, feeling every flutter of its heartbeat. The stallion lay curled near it, chest heaving slowly. Occasionally he opened one eye, checked the foal, and drifted back into something close to rest. It wasn't peace, not yet. But it was no longer despair. They arrived at the sanctuary just before dusk. It was a modest place, an old ranch repurposed into a haven for injured wildlife, mostly run on donations and hope. The woman who ran it, Marla, didn't ask many questions. She took one look at the Mustang, the foal, the wire-burned legs, and simply nodded. "In here," she said. "We'll get him stable." They moved quickly, fluids, antibiotics, clean space. The foal was examined, cleaned, fed. It cried once, a soft mewling sound that somehow brought tears to Dylan's eyes. The stallion, once he was reassured his baby was safe, laid his head down on the straw and did not move for a long time. Dylan sat outside later, head in his hands, trying to process what they'd seen. What they'd done. What the horse had endured. Mark joined him, carrying 2 tin cups of water. He handed one over without a word. After a moment, Dylan said, "He shouldn't have survived. Neither of them should have." Mark nodded. But he did. Because he refused to let the foal die. Cole stood nearby, arms crossed, eyes locked on the barn door. "It wasn't instinct," he said quietly. "It was a choice." Dylan looked up. "You think animals make choices like that?" Cole didn't hesitate. "I think sometimes they show us what we've forgotten. What loyalty looks like. What love costs." They all sat in silence then, letting the sky burn orange and gold. Behind them, in the cool dark of the barn, the stallion stirred. The foal let out a soft snort. Life, slow and fragile, was rebuilding itself one breath at a time. And the men who had only wanted a quiet escape from the world found themselves witnesses to something much bigger, something ancient and raw, a bond born not of blood but of sheer will to protect. Dylan leaned back and closed his eyes, knowing tomorrow would bring new trials, medical needs, maybe decisions no one wanted to make. But for now they had done something that mattered. And the Mustang had given everything to reveal a truth buried deep beneath his trembling frame. He was not just a beast. He was a father. The sanctuary had grown quiet with nightfall, save for the occasional rustle of straw or a soft exhale from the recovering Mustang. The foal now rested with bandaged legs curled beneath it, its breathing more regular, though each rise and fall of its chest seemed to count the seconds aloud. In the warm barn light, the stallion stood sentry. Still weak, still worn, but upright, his massive body casting shadows against the wooden beams like a monument carved from survival. Outside, Mark sat at a table with a map unrolled, tracing a red line with his finger, eyes narrowed. Cole stood near him, watching not the paper but the edges of the trees, the invisible places where sound vanished and threats were born. Dylan approached slowly, a half-finished sandwich in hand that he wasn't really eating. Mark tapped the map. This canyon where we found them is not random. It's a corridor. For migration? Dylan asked. Mark nodded. For mustangs, deer, even coyotes. But something's wrong. That barbed wire wasn't just a stray coil. It was set. Set how? Dylan asked. Cole finally turned to look at them. Purposefully. It was strung at an angle low enough to catch small legs, foals, fawns. It wasn't there to keep animals out. It was there to trap them. A silence thickened between them. The implications settled like dust in their lungs. Poachers? Dylan asked, though the word felt too sanitized. Worse, Mark said. Hunters who want trophies and don't care about cruelty. There've been rumors. Half-hidden game trails, snapped limbs. A few months back, a foal turned up with its legs broken. They said it fell in a ravine. He looked up. Now I'm not so sure. Cole stepped forward and pointed at a different place on the map. I saw tire tracks, off-road, high clearance. Not from our direction. Someone else was in that canyon not long before we were. Maybe even the same day. Dylan's eyes darkened. And they left a baby tangled in wire. Knowing the herd would abandon it. Hoping predators would clean up their mess. No, Cole said grimly. They wanted the stallion. Big, strong, perfect coloring. He wouldn't leave the foal. So they made sure both of them stayed. Mark's jaw tightened. He was baited. None of them spoke for a long moment. Then Mark rolled up the map with finality. We need to go back. If there's more traps, more animals, we can't let this go. Dylan hesitated. And if we run into whoever did it? Cole didn't blink. Then they picked the wrong canyon. They left the next morning just after sunrise. Marla promised to keep watch over the stallion and foal. He won't leave the baby's side, she said with a tired smile. He wakes up if I even shift the hay. The canyon hadn't changed. It greeted them again with silence, unnaturally still, like something was holding its breath. Cole led the way, following memory and instinct, his footsteps barely disturbing the dust. Dylan carried the wire they had cut, hoping to match its source. Mark brought a camera and a notepad, the tools of someone who knew evidence might be the only weapon that mattered. As they descended, the echoes began again, loose stones falling from unseen heights, the faint rattle of dry brush in a breeze that felt like breath. Every sound was suspect. Every shadow felt like it watched. They found the first sign an hour in. Another wire trap. This one tangled with old tufts of brown fur. The blood had dried into the sand. Mark knelt and measured the tension. Set at the same height. This one was tripped. Cole found boot prints nearby. Heavy. What? Fresh enough to still hold shape. They've been back, he said. Maybe checking if anything was caught. Dylan knelt beside him. And if they come back again? Cole looked at the horizon. Then we stopped them. They moved deeper. Found two more traps, one half buried, one new. Mark took pictures, carefully marked the locations. It wasn't just careless cruelty now. It was systematic. Deliberate. Then came the sound of an engine. They froze. The growl of a truck rolled over the canyon rim like thunder. Not close but not far either. They dropped low behind a ledge, peering through scrub. A dusty black pickup crept into view, tires spitting gravel, windows tinted. It stopped near the third trap. A man stepped out. Tall. Stocky. Wore desert camo and a weathered cap. His rifle slung lazily across his back as though it were just another tool. He moved with the casual certainty of someone who thought he owned the ground beneath his boots. They watched as he knelt near the trap, adjusted the wire, checked a camera strapped to a tree. He didn't hide his actions. He didn't expect witnesses. Mark whispered, "We need photos. License plate. Everything." Cole was already moving, circling wide, silent as a shadow. Dylan snapped a few shaky shots with his phone, his hands sweating. The man adjusted another camera, then stood and stretched, yawning, utterly unconcerned. He pulled a walkie from his belt. Trap 3's clean. Nothing yet. Maybe check 5 before we head in. Another voice crackled back. Copy that. Meet at the drop. Dylan's pulse thudded. There's more of them. Mark's voice was tight. And they're not done hunting. Cole returned minutes later. Plates fake. Spray painted to look rusted. The whole truck's a ghost. Mark stood. We have enough. We report it. We take it public. Cole stared at the truck. Or we dismantle every trap and drive them out. Let them know they're being hunted now. The tension grew thick. But it broke suddenly, not with words but with a sound they all recognized now. A horse's cry. Panicked. Somewhere nearby. Dylan's head snapped toward the noise. That's not the stallion. It's another Mustang. They moved without hesitation. Over the next ridge they found it, a young mare trapped. One leg caught in fresh wire, blood darkening the sand. Her eyes rolled with terror as she thrashed, but the barbs only dug deeper. Mark dropped to his knees. We need to cut her loose, fast. Dylan moved to hold her steady, murmuring soft nothings as Cole worked with brutal efficiency, slicing through the wire. The mare shrieked once, then collapsed, her chest heaving. They freed her just as the truck's engine roared to life again nearby. Cole looked up. We've got minutes. Mark pointed toward a narrow game trail. We lead her out. Get her safe. Then we come back with the sheriff. The mare limped but followed, guided gently, carefully by Dylan. Blood streaked her coat, but she moved with the desperate instinct of something that knew help when it came. Behind them, the truck began to move again, circling toward their last position. Cole stood on the ridge and stared after it. This wasn't over. It had just begun. And in the shadows of the canyon, the men who hunted for trophies now had eyes watching from the cliffs, and 3 rescuers determined to make the wild safe again. The sheriff's truck rumbled up the dirt road, dust trailing behind like smoke from a fire long burning. Mark stood at the edge of the ranch property, eyes narrowed against the sun, arms crossed. He had sent the photos, the footage, the GPS coordinates. He'd written the report 3 times, each time with a trembling hand and a tighter jaw. Now the law was here, not just to listen but to act. Sheriff Douglas stepped out slowly, hands on his belt. He was a large man with the gait of someone who'd seen too much and forgotten how to be surprised. He walked with deliberate pace toward the barn, where Cole waited with Marla and Dylan. Inside, the foal lay quietly, legs still wrapped in gauze, its breathing less ragged than before. The stallion had finally lain down beside it, trusting the walls enough to close his eyes. Douglas entered the barn, looked around, and nodded once. You weren't exaggerating, he said. No, sir, Cole said. And that's just the start. They went over everything again, each trap location, each footprint, the black truck, the fake plates, the hidden cameras. Dylan showed the video of the hunter adjusting the snare, slow and damning. Marla added a small folder, a vet's report detailing the injuries to the foal and now, the mare they'd found yesterday. Barbed wire. Intentional. Malicious. Douglas said little. He took notes. Asked questions. When they were done, he stood in the doorway, looking at the foal as it rested beneath the watchful eye of the battered Mustang. I'll need a team, he muttered. And a judge that isn't afraid of dust or blood. Mark took a breath. We'll go with you. We can help. Douglas didn't argue. By the following morning, 3 deputies, 2 wildlife officers, and 1 game warden rolled into the canyon under a cloudy sky. Cole led them down. He didn't speak much, but his eyes never stopped moving. Every trail marker, every faded print, every snapped branch, they all spoke to him. He moved like the land was telling him a secret, and this time he was ready to listen. They found more traps. Dozens. Some old. Some fresh. Some soaked in the silent sorrow of animals long gone. But some, horrifyingly, still baited. One was set with raw meat. Another with a synthetic scent that mimicked a mare in heat. Mark's stomach turned. This isn't just hunting, one deputy muttered. This is torture. The game warden found another camera strapped to a tree. They're recording it, she said. For sport. That night they waited. Hidden along the cliffs, cold creeping into their bones, they watched the mouth of the canyon. Dylan huddled near Cole, gripping binoculars he barely used. The wind howled above, but down here among the shadows, it was quiet. Until the headlights came. Same black truck. Same slow, crawling approach. It stopped near Trap 5. A second vehicle arrived moments later, an ATV light and fast. 2 more men dismounted. One carried a tranquilizer gun. The other had a knife strapped to his thigh. They moved like this wasn't the first time. Casual. Confident. Predatory. Until the lights flared. Spotlights from the sheriff's truck blinded them in an instant. A loudspeaker barked commands. Deputies surged forward, guns drawn. The hunters froze, then scrambled. One bolted for the ridge. Cole was faster. He tackled him before he'd made it 3 feet up. The man hit the ground with a scream, face scraping rock. Mark cornered the one with the knife, who raised both hands but still smirked. They're just animals, he said. Mark punched him anyway. In the chaos, Dylan's camera kept rolling. The final trap had been sprung, not by a horse but by justice. Over the next week, arrests were made. Evidence was seized. Videos, wire coils, logs of where they'd hunted and what they'd taken. The faces of the men who claimed they loved the wilderness were plastered across news stations, shackled by their own pride and greed. The sanctuary became more than a shelter. It became a symbol. People came. First from nearby, then from farther. Volunteers offered help. Donations poured in. Children visited to see the foal, now nicknamed Whisper, learning to stand properly on her healing legs. The stallion never left her side. "He's a father now," Marla said one evening as the sun painted the paddocks in gold. "Or maybe he always was." Cole watched them through the fence. "He reminds me of someone," he said, and Mark chuckled. They repaired fences, reinforced gates, expanded the shelter's reach. The young mare they'd rescued was healing too, less afraid now, her ears no longer pinned flat in constant terror. She stayed close to Whisper, as though guarding her in place of the stallion when he wandered a few feet away. Dylan wrote an article. The title read, "They hunted a Mustang. But what they found beneath him changed everything." It went viral. People read about the stallion who protected a baby that wasn't his. About the wire traps. About the men who thought no one would ever see the pain they inflicted. And about the 3 rescuers who refused to turn away. But beneath all the headlines there was something simpler. Something quieter. One afternoon, Dylan sat near the paddock, sketching the stallion. The great horse came closer, his eyes softer now, his limp almost gone. He lowered his head, brushing against Dylan's chest. A silent thank you, perhaps. Or maybe just an acknowledgement. "You saved her," Dylan whispered. "And now we saved you." Mark approached from behind, a coffee in hand. "We'll never know how he found the strength to carry her." "No," Dylan said. "But we know why he did." Cole joined them a few minutes later, brushing hay from his jacket. "Because in the end it's not about strength. It's about love." They stood together, 3 men changed, not just by what they'd seen, but by what they'd chosen to do when it mattered most. They could have left. Could have said it wasn't their problem. But they stayed. They fought. They listened to the cry in the canyon and answered with action. And now, beneath the open sky, redemption wasn't just a word. It was a place. A foal learning to run. A stallion watching her. A man with a camera. Another with a bruised knuckle. One more who had found his voice in silence. The road to redemption wasn't straight. It wasn't clean. But it was worth walking. Because somewhere in that canyon, among the wire and scars and broken bones, something beautiful had been born. And it was still running.